morning show here on Arise News. Time now for the week that was. Let's take a look at the top stories that made headlines around the globe this week. And we begin with Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, who's calling on West African leaders to stick to their constitutional term limits. The comments followed decisions by Ivory Coast's President Alassane Ouattara and Guinea's President Alpha Condé to run for third terms in their respective countries. President Buhari spoke during an in-person summit of leaders of the regional bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, otherwise known as ECOWAS, held in Niamey. Well, President Ouattara's decision to run for a third time following the sudden death of his preferred successor triggered protests in Ivory Coast, as the critics say the move is unconstitutional. And truly, indeed, this is something that we're hearing so many times, especially across the African continent. You'll know that before his untimely death, Pierre Nkurunziza also stoked lots of feelings of unrest in Burundi because he wanted to put a referendum to the people where they could see whether or not they wanted to change their constitutional term limits and run again. And even though that didn't work so much in his favor as in terms of how the people received that, we're seeing so many examples of other African leaders not wanting to relinquish power. And it's disappointing because a hallmark of a good democracy is the fact that this is stewardship. We're going to be leading this country for however long the people say, or rather for however long the Constitution says we should be doing so. And then once we've reached our term, whether it's 1 or 2, depending on the country, we should gracefully hand over to the next person. And we don't see that happening a lot. And
that brings to memory Rwanda. Rwanda, I mean, he had to change the constitution. They had to do a referendum. Now he's going to stay there for, I think, 2034. You know, and then of course he was tried here in Nigeria by former President Olusegun Obasanjo, which didn't work out. And then of course in Ivory Coast currently, Ouattara, he stepped down actually. Right. But I don't know about his own case, because the person who was supposed to take over for his party then died. Right. And then so he came back and said he wanted to contest. You know, so I think it still boils down to the same thing, because you're not the only person who is intelligent in the country. You're the only person who can run the affairs of the country. That's the issue. So yeah, another person should have been brought up. And then it said the success is not really true success until you groom somebody else. So if you're the only person who is going to keep on leading the nation, it means the rest of the people, you're not grooming anybody. Exactly. And that's still your fault. Exactly that. Right. So we'll go to the next story. Members of Organised Labour in Rivers State gathered at their just reopened state secretariat to hear from their leaders the outcome of a closed-door meeting held between Labour leaders and Rivers State government, where Labour in the state had planned to embark on a protest following a face-off with the government. But while addressing workers at the secretariat in Port Harcourt, the national president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, Ayuba Waba, said Labour will continue to defend its own. He said the state government has reached an agreement with them. He told them that the government promised to meet their expectations. Also, the Rivers State NLC chairperson Beatrice Itubo thanked the national leadership who came down to Rivers State to defend the workers.
The beauty of the fact that, yes, we will continue to defend the rights of every worker. We will continue to defend the right of every pensioner. And that's why we are taking the twin issue of the pensioners and also the issue of workers, because all workers are actually potential pensioners. So I think with this, we can assure our senior citizens who have also turned up in good number to hear those issues that we have discussed and also reach some resolution.
Today we have gone, we have conquered, and we have brought the document down to you. We rest assured that we will also ensure that these documents are implemented to the letter. We will be in constant connection with the National Secretary so that we will continue to address them and also inform them of the way the document is being implemented.
It was resolved as follows. 1. Signing of agreement on national minimum wage. Parties have agreed to sign the agreement on the implementation of the new national minimum wage and consequential adjustment. 2. On sealing of the NLC Rivers State Secretariat. The NLC Secretariat, which was sealed for the correction of structural defects, will immediately be unsealed while government continues with the correction work, if any. Payment of withheld check-off dues. The Rivers State government shall immediately restore the remittance of check off dues, and pay all outstanding arrears to the respective trade unions.
The important thing at this stage is that the protest tomorrow will not hold any longer. And then that is the position of Rivers State Government.
Present the agreement reached on both sides. The high point of which, as ably noted by the Secretary of Government, is that the planned protest tomorrow or any other date has been suspended following the agreement on the terms reached by both parties and read out by the NLC president. So we call on all our workers who have been apprehensive to note this suspension of the planned strike and to go about their normal duties without any fear of molestation or anything on account of the anticipated strike.
Well, the petroleum products price. No. We're supposed to chat on that particular.
If we can, only if you want to. Only if you want to.
I just when I started reading, I felt something was not.
Something feels rough. Something feels off. So we were just talking about the NLC there. Yeah. You know, when we listened to Ayuba Wahab. Thank you.
Awaba, yeah.
Got there in the end.
Yeah.
When he said that, you know, they're going to be looking at it separately, that we also want to focus on the workers themselves and, of course, pensions, but then, of course, workers, because workers have the potential to become pensioners. You just think, well, of course, absolutely. But, like, truly, in terms of specificity, I just don't think enough information has been given out to the people in order for them to be informed just how they're going to be protected by the NLC and what plans there are in place for their own progress. And I think that continues to be the issue here. Lots of talk, but perhaps not so much action, to the point where the workforce across Nigeria feel as though they are protected by this union.
Well, the interesting thing in Rivers State, because it said you disagree to agree. I mean, they've disagreed to agree, and Rivers State came to the table. They came to the table, and the Rivers Labour, they were happy that the National Labour Force came to defend their workers, and so they downed tools. I'm sure along the line we're probably going to get to the National Labour and CSOs organizations. They're having a meeting today, actually, with the federal government over the price hike, the tariffs, you know. So I'm sure we're going to get there. If we don't get there, we're fine. But that's the most important thing here, that the people agreed. All right, I think it's you.
Oh, thank you. Well, the Petroleum Products Price Regulatory Agency says it can no longer provide a monthly price template for the sale of premium motor spirit, popularly known as petrol. The agency said that doing so would completely contradict the deregulation policy in the oil and gas industry. Its Executive Secretary Abdul Qadir Saidu gave the new direction at a press conference. So, I mean, what they're saying is that perhaps providing a template would do more harm than good. Is that to avoid constant fluctuations where we are having a reduction one month and then a price hike the following month? I'm not sure.
Well, the reason for not having a template any longer is that there's no longer, it's deregulated. So the PPMC can't continue to fix price any longer. Prices have to depend on the vagaries of demand and supply. But then the PPPRA says they would not allow, because I think it was yesterday I was reading, and I understood, because I did ask Emmanuel Efeni the other day, federal government said they won't fix prices, it's deregulated, but that they will not allow consumers to be unnecessarily, got the better of, for want of words to use, that they will try to control. I said, you're deregulating and then you're controlling, but it was explained yesterday just what the central bank does in the financial sector. Now the PPPRA will be doing that, but there's no more fixing of prices. It's now dependent on, but then there still lies the challenge of the fact that we're having to import crude, which is dependent on the international market of dollars. Definitely. So which means when the price of oil goes up, we'll have an issue. When it comes down, so there's still the fact that until we start producing oil here.
Right, or refining our own oil.
They're refining oil here. Prices might still increase, so it's still a huge challenge. All right, you're still watching the morning show. We'll be back in a bit with more. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still discussing the week that was, and the post-Brexit trade deal talks will continue despite the UK rejecting the EU's ultimatum to scrap plans to override the withdrawal agreement. The proposed internal market bill will be formally debated by MPs in the House of Commons for the first time on Monday. The UK and the EU are heading for a chaotic split without a trade deal after talks deadlocked with the bloc threatening a legal action. Meanwhile, Europe has overtaken the US in the rise of COVID-19 cases rising from fresh concerns.
Yeah, and a top legal functionary in the government just resigned recently because of this. He just felt that you can't change the goalpost midway. You know, why should you be tinkering? Particularly the issue that has to do with Northern Ireland.
Yes, and Ireland and their border.
Yeah, you know, so he felt, no, you can't be doing this, and so he had to resign. Not just him, I think some people even before him have had to resign, and it's odd. You know, one would ask, why would anybody want to, you know, it's been agreed, so why are you tinkering with it?
Here's the thing with Brexit, because it's still so tumultuous and it's very hard to pinpoint when we can get a confirmed phase or a deal. And even with the mini deals that we've had in the lead up to this, they haven't always been set in stone. So you have a situation where you have the people not really sure what is going to happen at the end of the year. And then when you look at 2020, us still being in the throes of a pandemic, people have almost forgotten that there is still this major negotiation that has to happen by the end of this year, by the end of this month almost. So you have to think, well, what is actually going to happen? And if it does turn out that the UK will crash out of the European Union, I mean, that would just be the final bow on like a year of, that was 2020, that was so unbelievably unexpected.
Yeah.
So I think with Brexit, we can literally just have to wait and see what is going to happen.
Everybody has to wait. And then, of course, during the week, UK got a deal with Japan, which was quite interesting. But we'll just wait and see what gives.
Definitely.
All right. Nigeria's National Food Security Council has met in Abuja to review the food supply situation in the country. President Buhari told members that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the level of preparedness for shocks in food security. He said the government has been able to avert a food crisis because of its ongoing policy of self-sufficiency. However, the president said there is need for more effort to increase food production and ensure self-sufficiency. He commended farmers for contributing to the stability in the agricultural sector and encouraged more investment in the agribusiness. Buhari said the federal government will continue to promote policies that will bring investment to the agriculture sector.
Today's session is taking place at a time when there is a heightened global concern around food supply systems that directly impacts food production and the ability to store and hold for periods of unavailability. As stated by the Food and Agricultural Organization, food security is dimensioned into 4 elements. A, physical availability of food. B, economic and physical access to food. C, food utilization. And D, the stability of the 3 previously mentioned elements over a sustained period. It is for this very reason that the quest for food security still remains at the forefront of this government's agenda. In the last 5 years, we have recorded notable achievements despite the decline in GDP by 6.1% in second quarter of 2020. As a direct result of coronavirus, the agricultural sector continued to grow because of government's targeted agricultural policies.
If Nigeria gets to the place where we can ensure food security, self-sufficiency, how beautiful that will be.
Absolutely.
And if agriculture is brought to the level where we can start depending solely and totally on oil, fantastic, you know. And so the president says that the central bank should stop giving foreign exchange to people who want to import food, you know, which is good on the surface, one hopes that that works out. But the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria is saying that there might be inflation because of that. But then the question to ask is, do you have the information that government has to be able to make that decision? You know, it will be interesting if we attain food sufficiency and stop importing
What's also
food,
interesting,
grow what we need to, what we want to eat.
Absolutely. I think that, well, not to say that the president isn't aware, because of course it is, but the plan to create an area of self-sufficiency around food in Nigeria is vast. It's not going to be easy. And while we can applaud Nigeria for averting a food crisis, we also had to look at it with a closer and a more critical eye. By how much did we avert a food crisis? Because food poverty continues to be a major issue and a reality for many Nigerians across the entire spread of the country. So while we can say on a national level there hasn't been a food crisis, there is still very much a crisis among food when we're looking at different parts of the country, most especially remote areas, most especially areas towards the north of the country, which are already impacted by insurgency and the violence and the like. So I do think that while we can say, well, this is a good thing, and on its face, growing what you eat is a good thing. It's a fantastic thing, but is that really the reality for Nigerians?
Well, I can just add
all Nigerians. Rather.
No pain, no gain. And someone said, if you keep on watching the atmosphere, you may never plant and you may never harvest. You know, just like what what Femi said. He said, there's no better time talking about fixing, raising the price of petrol, the price of petroleum motor spirit. That there's not particularly any good time to do what maybe you should have done years back. So. Yeah, the question of balancing comes in. But the most important thing is that you have a government that is thinking towards that direction. Get your food, grow your food that you want to eat instead of importing. And we should have got that by now. So it's good.
So, well, moving on to South Africa. And the South African economy has sunk deeper into recession, with its gross domestic product for the second quarter of 2020 plummeting by 51%. Largely as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the country's strict lockdown. South Africa imposed one of the strictest lockdowns in the world in April and May in response to the coronavirus outbreak, which has now claimed more than 15,000 lives and have infected more than 600, or rather almost 640,000 people in the country. That is undoubted. South Africa, one of my friends is actually living in Johannesburg, and she said that the lockdown in the throes of it was very, very strict. They could, well, just like in Nigeria, you couldn't leave if you didn't have any reason to be out of the house. She herself still hasn't been back into her work office since April. So you can imagine how much change has gone, how much economic activity has been lost. In the name of protecting the people. So I think that when we're hearing these economic scorecards from different countries, we can expect that many countries are going to be suffering. And it's not unique to Africa or South Africa. It's definitely the case in the United Kingdom.
US particularly.
The United States, absolutely. Yeah. Italy, China too. So we have to get to a point where we are expecting and we're looking forward to how these countries will recover and how soon they will recover.
That's just post-pandemic. As the pandemic begins to maybe peter away, if you like, then what do you do, to restore the economies of the world? It's not just South Africa, but I mean, it's poignant to see that they've entered into recession. One hopes that things are put in place to bring them out, but it's all due to COVID pandemic. Due to the pandemic, I said COVID pandemic. Well, we'll just keep on watching. It's not like we said earlier, it's not just with South Africa. No. In US, jobs have been lost. Even now, the jobs haven't been recovered. People have lost their jobs, and then we talk about even when people have to go back to school, the parents who've lost jobs, the parents who their salaries have been cut. These questions to be raised. How are they going to? It's affected the economy of the households.
Absolutely.
So how are they going to manage food, manage sending their wards to school, pay their school fees? What's going to happen in that area? So we'll just keep on watching and see what plays out. But COVID-19, it's done quite a lot of bad for the nations of the world. Yes. All right, at this juncture, we will take a break and be back in a bit. Still stay with us.